Nella Larson was born on April 13, 1891 in Chicago. Larson's parents were both immigrants, her mother a white woman from Denmark and her father a black cook from the West Indies. Larson's father disappeared early in her life, contributing to the questions she would later have about her own racial identity. Her mother married a white man named Peter Larson, which is where Nella's last name originates. Larson's parents would soon have another child, leaving Nella as the sole black person in her nuclear family. This circumstance, along with her experiences growing up in Chicago in the early 1900s, would surely provide inspiration for her future work, Passing. First published in 1929, Passing tells the story of two biracial women who grew up in Chicago but end up leading very different lives. While Irene, the main character, lives a fairly typical life for an African-American woman in the early 1900s, Claire moves out of the United States to Europe at an early age when her father passes away. This sudden move gives Claire an opportunity to do what is known as passing. Having very few connections in her new home, the only people aware of her true identity as a half-black woman were her aunts who she was living with. Given her unknown identity and her appearance, which was more typical of a white woman rather than black, Claire was able to marry a white man who had no idea of her true racial identity. In fact, we would later find out that Claire's husband has a distinct dislike for black people, making Claire's social and romantic life one of cultural secrecy. When Claire and Irene randomly encounter each other on a rooftop lounge in Chicago later on in their adult lives, Irene doesn't know quite what to think about Claire's practice of racial passing. It is obvious that there were advantages to being known as white in that period of time, especially in the United States. Admission into white-only restaurants, bars, and lounges, fairness in the justice system, and freedom from prejudice are only some of the advantages that could be gained by passing as white. But what is left often thought and talked of in the context of passing is what is left behind. Larson's novel highlights these losses, as it tells the story of Claire's attempt to live secretly as a black woman and publicly as a white woman. Claire attempts to rediscover the piece of her own identity which she forfeited by passing as white while maintaining her white identity with her husband. While her attempt ultimately ends in failure, I believe Larson's novel means to show that the tragedy was not in Claire's failure to maintain a secret identity, but in her failure to embrace her true identity in the first place. While Claire would have certainly lost the social and economic advantages which she gained by passing, there is no greater loss than the loss of personal identity, which Claire no doubt experienced.